Okay, the big ticket item in this range is of course deforestation. We can take a hectare or 2.5 acres of land that is fully forested and see what would happen if you deforest it. You think deforestation is such a no-brainer in terms of something that has to be prevented, avoided, and enforced to be avoided to help climate change and reducing carbon emissions, because forests take up carbon and they store it for a long time. And perturbations have now shown to make certain parts of the Amazon carbon positive, which means it's actually emitting more carbon than it's storing. There are issues of whether a mature forest will continue to take up carbon. There are evidences that it may, and there is debate. There is wildfires which can release all that carbon back. And the bigger debate is about whether afforesting or planting lots of trees is a good idea or not. You think that is obviously good as well, but there is a lot of debate because it depends on where you plant, what you plant, how much you plant, what are the other resource limitations, water, nutrients, and what the unintended consequences may be, and the fact that it may burn down and release all the carbon, and of course where the land would come from for afforestation, and in general, what is the cost? If people think afforestation is a silver bullet and you put all the resources into that and then it burns up in 10 years, whereas that resources could have been gone into wind farms, solar farms, whatever else, right? So this is not a very easy question. It's rather complicated, but one can always look at just the carbon footprint of deforestation, right? So that's 500 tons of CO2 equivalent. That's equivalent to an average car driving 700,000 miles 28 times around the world. Okay, so you can get an idea of how much carbon is stored, and when you say deforestation, you are assuming you are converting all that carbon back and putting it into the atmosphere. Here are the top 10 countries by total forest area. So Russian Federation, Brazil, Canada, United States of America, China, Australia, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Indonesia, Peru, and India. And some of these places have either climate denial, or there is political issues of cutting down forests and not preserving the forests. There is demand from development, economic growth. There are conflicts going on. There is competition with palm oil industry in some places, and of course conversion to agriculture and urbanization and so on and so forth. So let's run through some numbers from our world and data on the deforestation. This is the annual change in forest area. Net change in forest area measures forest expansion either through afforestation or natural expansion minus deforestation. And I think this is for year 2015 if I'm not mistaken, but it doesn't matter. The numbers are similar for the last several years. Only thing to watch out for is where it may be accelerating, and there are indications that overall deforestation is actually slowing down. It's not stopped, but it is slowing down. Is that good news? Well, these days that counts for good news, right? So afforestation, many countries have committed to the nationally determined contributions under Paris Agreement as doing afforestation to sequester carbon, and in fact Russia announced that it will go net zero by 2060 and the forests will do most of the work, and people are already skeptical about that. Nonetheless, you can see that the annual change in forest area is positive in many places. Satellite data shows this for I think 2000 to 2017 or so. There are issues in terms of whether the greening is related to, because it looks at something called leaf area index. Greening could be due to agriculture, not forest growth necessarily. There are regions with large losses like the Amazon in the Brazil and parts of Africa here, and various other regions with losses. Canada shows up as a loss here as well, and Greenland. But if agriculture can also do the work of supplying food and sequestering carbon in the soil with restorative, regenerative permaculture, whatever agroforestry type of agriculture, then it can still be a good way, but not if it is done with heavy tillage, heavy fertilizer, and industrial farming. Okay, annual deforestation in million hectares. India is now larger here. China is still quite high. Brazil is, of course, a real sad story in terms of deforestation of the Amazon. Bolsonaro is not at all interested in climate change issues. There is no data from the US, and you can see that there are generally large number of regions with fairly high rate of deforestation. That's 500,000 hectare, million hectare, greater than 500 million hectare. That's not good news, right? But the world has lost 1/3 of its forest since the last ice age, as I said before. Since the ice age ended and we became agricultural species, deforestation for agriculture and so on has been going on. So here is what we know already: 29% land, almost 15 billion hectares, 71% is ocean, 71% is habitable land, 19% is barren land, and 10% is occupied by glaciers. In the habitable land, 10,000 years before present, 57% was forest, 42% was wild grassland and shrubs. 5,000 years ago, that had reduced by about a couple of percent to 55%. This had gone up actually to 44%. So converting to agriculture and then abandoning agriculture and moving on would have contributed to this expansion of wild grass and shrubs at the cost of forests, as one example. 1 billion hectares is equal to an area the size of the US. So you can see that US is up here, quite a big piece of land. By 1700 Common Era, the forest cover was down to 52%, grasslands 38%, and so you can see by 2018 the forest cover is down to 38%, 15% are crops, 31% is used for grazing. We talked about beef and its carbon footprint, so livestock, meat production and milk production, dairy, sheep and other things is now a massive operation, 31%, and 14% is here in wild grass and so on. And we have been adding urban and built up land as well along the way. 1/3 of the world's forests have been lost. Half of this occurred in the last century, so we have accelerated the deforestation. Almost half of the world's habitable land is used for agriculture. We looked at that as well. Just by region, agricultural land per capita, which comes mostly at the cost of forest land, Africa has dropped agricultural land per capita. Food production yield intensified yields go up. South America, North America, so Western Europe and Southeast Asia have remained steady over, and even Eastern Asia have remained steady over these 6 or 7 decades. Okay, so agricultural land is the sum of cropland and land used as pasture for grazing as livestock. Decadal losses in global forest over the last 3 centuries. This gives you another way of looking at it. So you can look at the color coding here. I have my friendly chopper going by. So there is forest loss and forest gain. So the main thing I would like to point out is that the deforestation remained steady here at 19 million hectares net loss per decade in these regions, and jumped to 30 million hectare net loss per decade here in the 50s after the war. Industrial production, new models of building things where you make things disposable so that people keep buying again and again every few years. Uh, Temperate deforestation peaks in the first half of the 20th century here, and then it has dropped off. So these green areas, and there is some recovery of forests now, whereas these forests here, global tropical forest loss peaked in the 1980s at 151 million hectare net loss, and then it has shown some reduction in loss. It's not a recovery, it's not complete stoppage to the deforestation, but as I said before, deforestation seems to be decreasing here. This is as of 2020 or so. So you can see that 47 million hectare net loss in the last decade. We lost 53 million hectares in the tropics, an area twice the size of New Zealand. We gained 6 million hectares in temperate regions, an area twice the size of Belgium, and so on and so forth. Okay, so global forest loss, deforestation versus forest degradation. Forest loss is defined as the combination of deforestation and forest degradation. Deforestation involves abrupt transitions from land with trees to land without trees with no subsequent regrowth. Forest degradation refers to thinning of the canopy and loss of carbon without a change in land use. Forest is expected to regrow if you leave it alone, but there is evidence that if this forest loss is associated with warming and reduction in rain, then the degradation may allow invasive species to come in which change the ecosystem dynamics and maybe replace the tall heavy trees with smaller trees, stunted growths, or just shrubs and invasive species. Okay, so globally, deforestation mostly from agriculture includes mining and urbanization, shifting agriculture, forest products, so logging, paper, pulp, etc., and wildfires. So you can see the distribution of millions of hectares and percentages. Most of it is going to agriculture, mining, and urbanization. Tropical regions, most of the loss is happening in tropical regions. So Latin America, Southeast Asia, Africa here, and the color codes are the same here, the usage types. Temperate regions, as we said, there has been some recovery at high latitudes, but you can see that Latin America and in the tropical regions, and North America and Russia, China, and South Asia in the temperate regions remain quite big in their role in deforesting. Drivers of tropical deforestation: forest degradation measures thinning of the forest canopy and loss of carbon in remaining forests. So the difficult ecological question is, how do species get selected when there is degradation? If you get carbon poor species that are invasive as well, then you're actually losing a lot of carbon, not just the trees. It is distinct from deforestation because it is not associated with the change in land use. So it's not converted to urbanization or agriculture, it's just degraded. So a forest can be expected to regrow, barring these other factors like climate change, warming, loss of rain, invasive species. Okay, so tropical, Asian, Latin American, and African. So timber and logging, fuel wood and charcoal. More than 80% of the people in sub-Saharan Africa do not have clean cooking fuels and rely on wood for fuel. So biomass burning is a horrible way, even for indoor air quality, health, particulate matters, pollution, global warming, aerosol impacts on rainfall, and so on and so forth. Wildfires, livestock grazing on forests. So you can see that timber and logging remains a massive contributor to deforestation and forest degradation. Forest degradation. Fuel and wood charcoal is high in Africa, and wildfires are affecting Latin America quite a bit. This is a big problem for Amazonia, for example. I don't know if that would count in Latin America, so please be careful. Nearly all of the global deforestation occurs in the tropics, so that's global, that is so this is tropical regions, and these are the temperate regions. So you can see that the tropical regions dominate the global deforestation. Global South, which struggles with food security, water security, and so on, sometimes does things that are bad for them in the long run by exploiting forest land for agriculture or urbanization or just biofuel and grazing and so on. But in all these numbers we have to be careful, because deforestation in the tropics is not necessarily, or forest degradation is not necessarily for local use. Timber and logging, for example, result in lots of exports. So this is a nice way to look at it. Who is contributing to deforestation abroad? Net deforestation embedded in trade is deforestation driven by imported goods minus exported goods. Net importers of deforestation are countries who contribute to net deforestation in other countries. The deforestation they cause in other countries is given as a positive value. So there is exporting going on in these countries so when it is positive, you are causing deforestation elsewhere. When it is negative, you are causing deforestation locally. So you are importing things which cause deforestation elsewhere when you are in these positive colors. So obviously large importing, somehow embedded trade here is also large positive for Russia, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, and so on. So the main idea is that deforestation can be looked at this way, but you have to see what the drivers are. And we said the drivers are timber and logging, for example, and that could all be for export, which means US may not show up as a country that is deforesting inside, but it is causing deforestation elsewhere. So this is something that is tricky and has to be managed as well. Okay, so deforestation, a very high carbon footprint. Saving forests is a no-brainer, and making sure that they don't burn down, that's a much more complicated issue. There are I have podcasts on how the wildfires are responding to climate change and anthropogenic impacts, so you can look that up. Okay.